Hey, everybody. Welcome to ClearPath LeaderCast. I'm glad you guys could join us today. My name is Craig Anderson. I am the president and founder of ClearPath Coaching and Consulting. Would love to hear from you guys today as I'm going through the content. While we're waiting for some people to come on, you can leave any comments that you have for me. I'll be able to see them as we're going through the session. If you have any questions on the content or just to say hello, you can absolutely do that and be happy to answer any questions. I won't know your name unless you have authorized StreamYard, and then I'll be able to see your name as well. So apologies if you haven't had a chance to do that. I won't know that you've done it. And I've got my stream set up, so we are ready to go today. So if you guys caught the blog, I'm going to go a little deeper into some of the things we talked about on the blog this week. So just to start off, Craig Anderson, ClearPath Coaching and Consulting. I spent over 25 years working in banking, leading national sales teams, leading national divisions of organizations. And really, as that business grew, I found myself more and more interested in the leadership aspects of my roles, what leadership meant, and what it was like to develop and build employees. And so the last business I ran was a small business. We grew that from $500,000 to $5 million in just a few years. And at the end of that, I realized one of the things that was most satisfying was really helping those employees grow and develop. So when we sold that business, I made the decision to jump over into the coaching realm. Really enjoy working with people who were like I was, accidental executives, those who find themselves in positions of authority but don't have a whole lot of formal training in business or leadership or anything else, and had to kind of learn on the fly. Can absolutely get there, but one of my goals is to help people get there just a little bit faster. So this week over on the blog, I talked about leadership lessons from a movie called Moneyball with Brad Pitt. Great movie. Talks about and I'll get way out of my depth here because I'm not a baseball guy, but from the Oakland A's and how Billy Beane, the manager of that team, general manager, really changed the way that they recruited players and the way they built their team, which turned out to be something that really caught on. But anytime you're leading dramatic change in an organization, it really tests you as a leader. It really stretches you as a leader. And so what I wanted to talk about today was 3 big lessons that I took away from that movie that I think were incredibly resonant for any leader at any stage of both their career or in their organization. But we're really going to cover off on 3 lessons this week. One is the loneliness of leadership, which I don't think is talked about enough. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why leaders have to innovate. And then the last piece is we're going to talk about how leaders have to make some tough decisions from time to time. So let's start out with just this idea of loneliness and leadership. If you're in a leadership role, give me a like. And by the way, if you're catching this on a replay, give me a hashtag replay, leave a comment, and I'll be happy to come back in and answer it as well. Leadership can be a really lonely place. People look at leaders and they think, man, look at that. They have power, they have respect, they have authority, they probably make more money, and think that's what I want. I had a whole lot of people over my career who would say, well, I want to get into leadership. Why? Well, I want to make more money. More money is great. But if that's the only reason you want to jump into a leadership role, it's going to be really difficult for you. As someone once said to me, leaders are people who can stand the pain of leadership more than other people. Leadership is difficult. One of the things you find as you're growing in your career, you may have kind of leadership roles as a manager, director, different things. And that's great because you probably have a peer group of other managers and directors who you can kind of talk to and commiserate with, who are very much going through the same experience as you are. And you'll build some trusting relationships. You can have those conversations. But as your career grows, the number of people around you reduces in the organization to the point where if you're leading the organization, you suddenly find yourself looking around and you don't have anybody to talk to. It was kind of funny to me as growing up I had a couple of opportunities where I was brought up into a higher level leadership role over people who had been my peers. And I was shocked by, I used to have a great pulse of what was going on. I used to know what was going on and I'd hear it from those folks. And suddenly I wasn't hearing it anymore. Because when you're in that leadership role, one, people don't necessarily want to bring the problems and issues to you, which can be really a struggle. They look at you differently. So that you suddenly find yourself increasingly isolated. And that can be tough. One of the other reasons you find yourself increasingly isolated is you have to make all the decisions, and you can get a lot of input. One of the challenges you find is everybody comes to you with an agenda. Even if it's the best of intentions, they do have some sort of agenda that they're working with. So that can become a big challenge too, because you're not sure you're always getting the clear and pure information. So you start to feel increasingly isolated, and that can be a little depressing. It can wear on you. It can cause some sleepless nights. So there's a few things for you to think about if you're in that position. One of which is, outside of your business, find someone you can have coffee with or have conversation with who is, in a great situation. You find another person similarly situated to you, a business owner or a senior executive, who you can have conversations with, who will hold you accountable, who will support you, who will help you process some of the things that you're dealing with. And usually those are mutual things where the two of you can really support each other. So that's great. There's also opportunities to get into masterminds or group coaching experiences where you're surrounded by like-minded business owners or like-minded executives who, again, are going through that process. But what they like about it is you're all becoming unbiased sources of advice and input, because frankly, that group has nothing in common aside from being in the group. So they gain nothing from your business that way. So you get that kind of purity of input without an agenda. So that's another great solution. Third great solution, if you're struggling with the loneliness of leadership, is to dive in and get a coach. Get someone who can work with you, because sometimes people just aren't comfortable being vulnerable with others. They want that confidential relationship, and that's what coaching can bring. So I really encourage people to look at any of those three if they're struggling with the loneliness of leadership. In the movie, Billy Beane's case is, he separated himself out because he knew someday he was going to have to let some of those players go. So he didn't want to build those relationships. And that's a tough place to be. You are with people, you do want to treat them with empathy, treat them with respect. Have some sort of relationship with your team. I don't think you're going out golfing or hanging out. I rarely did those things with my team. But I do think, we're all in a relationship and we can't just ignore that piece of it. But the other thing, he had a lot in his life, but he did separate himself away because he saw that tough decision and he didn't want friendship to enter into it. And that can be a tough place to be. So again, build your relationships with your team, but really find ways to get support for yourself as you're growing. Another one that I want to talk about, and this kind of also ties into the leadership piece, is just the importance for leaders to actually innovate. And, in the movie, Billy Beane was really innovating. He was bringing an entire new approach. If you've seen the movie, there's a scene where he's telling the scouts that they're going to do things differently. And, the pushback he got, the, denial that what he was doing was right, became really, it was really a tense situation. And you're going to find yourself in a leadership role where you're going to want to innovate. You're going to want to answer the question or turn back the question that says, well, we've always done it that way, and say, well, we're no longer going to do it that way. We're going to find better ways to do things. People in general don't like change. And when you're coming in as a new leader, especially into an organization, and you're that change agent, that can be a really difficult road, because you're pushing people to expand their boundaries. You're pushing people outside of their comfort zone. But that's how we grow. When we kind of get outside of ourselves, that's when we have these opportunities to grow. What was I can't even think of the metaphor I was trying to come up with. But when you have that ability to push the team, realize you're going to get some pushback. And that's not something you really want to get in your way. Now, if somebody gives you solid, fact-based data that shows why what you're trying to do isn't going to work, or over time it doesn't work, well, that's also about having enough self-integrity as the leader to say, hey, you know what, I was wrong. We're going to go back and do it this way. But you've got to innovate. You've got to find new ways. Companies that don't innovate stagnate, and divisions and sales divisions or operating divisions. So finding new ways to do things more efficiently, to do more. Those are the things that are going to help your career move and help your company grow. And it's going to help you develop the team around you, because they're going to start to stretch those muscles that are going to allow them to become innovators and allow them to move the business forward. If you do that within your organization, you're going to find you become more of a learning organization, more of a growing organization. And that's going to help you beat the competition. That's going to help you stand out from the crowd. So it's important for the leader to demonstrate that idea of innovation, because that's what's going to allow you to spring forward. So think about that innovation, but realize people don't like change. So you're really going to have to commit to that course of action. You're going to have to stand firm in it. And that's part of being a leader, is you've got to stand firm in those things that you believe are right for the organization. It starts with you and everything flows from there. So it's really crucial to kind of stick to your guns as you're going into this innovation effort. The last one I want to talk about that comes out of the movie too is that, one thing when you're in charge, people say, oh, I want to be a leader because I want to make more money. Yeah. But the other thing you have to do when you're the leaders, you've got to make the hard calls. And that for me was one of the most stressful parts of being a leader. I did not like, for me, any difficult conversation looked like conflict. I don't like conflict. I've never liked conflict. So I kind of framed every difficult conversation, and I've talked about that in a prior episode of ClearPath LeaderCast. I would frame all these conversations as conflict. So that was always difficult for me. And the ultimate conflict is when you've got to get people to do something either they don't want to do, or you're going to have to tell people to move along. And we saw both of those in Moneyball with Billy Beane, the manager of the team. And I had to ask some people, what's the difference between a general manager and a manager, who reports to whom? But the manager, the person who was running the team on the field, didn't want to play the way Billy built the team to play. So the team was losing. And he worked and he cajoled and he did everything he could to get the manager to play the players the way he designed them when he built the team and put all those pieces together. And the manager flat out wouldn't do it for a couple of reasons. One, he wanted an extension. And two, if he didn't get the extension, he wanted to be able to plausibly explain the moves he was making with the players. So Billy kind of couldn't get this guy to do what he wanted to do. And he wasn't in a position to fire him, if I understand the relationship correctly. So sometimes we're in that. Sometimes we have a peer in another part of the business when we're in a leadership role. And, they don't report to us. We don't report to them, but we have to find a way to get them there. Now, Billy did something pretty, he actually got rid of the players that the manager was putting in the places he wanted other people and just got them off the team. So he did the end around on the manager and got what he wanted and what he designed the team to be. It's a bit manipulative, but sometimes if you can't get someone where you're at, you've got to create a situation where you can achieve what it is you need to achieve for the organization. Just because you're not on the top level of the organization doesn't mean you're not a leader. It doesn't mean you can't influence change. And that's what we saw here, is he was able to still influence change by building a situation where the person had to work with him that way. So that's one way to do it. But then there was also another situation that Billy had where he had one of the head of scouting that was under him who just flat out did not agree with the way Billy was doing things and just really got in his face about it. And then Billy made the hard call there where he said, you know what, you're gone, you're fired. And that is probably the ultimate difficult conversation, is when you've got that person who's not performing, who's not fitting in. Sometimes you have to let those people go. And the longer you wait to make those decisions, the more painful they are. I had a boss, and this was a great phrase that I use all the time, is problems don't age well. When you have we don't want to just fire people for the sake of firing them. We want to try and help people learn and grow, like I talked about in the innovation section, help them become better at what it is they're doing. But if they're resistant to it, if they don't fit into your culture, they don't want to go the way that you want them to go, you are better off firing them sooner rather than later. Because if you don't do it and they're actually actively working against you in the organization, or they're just seen as not pulling their own weight, that's going to hurt you with everybody in the organization and everybody on your team. So sometimes you've got to make the hard calls, and sometimes that hard call is telling someone their time with the organization is up. It doesn't mean you don't do it without empathy. It doesn't mean you don't do it without respect, but you do it. And you do it as soon as you realize, and you're going to know when that time is. Now, your body may say, hey, I just want to give him one more chance, give her one more chance. But when you start getting into that mode, that's when you start hurting other parts of the organization. So when that time hits, you need to be honest with yourself and do the thing that needs to be done. And quite frankly, if that person's not happy, I've been in organizations where I came out of a world where sometimes the salaries were pretty inflated, and people didn't want to leave because they didn't want to leave those big salaries, but they were miserable. And sometimes you're actually doing them a favor because they're going to get into a situation that's actually better for them. So those are the things that I wanted to bring up with all of you today. 3 tough lessons on leadership that I think are crucial is: 1, it's lonely. Do something about it. Get an accountability partner, get in a group, get a coach that can help you out. 2, leaders have to innovate, and helps you grow. It helps your team grow. It increases possibilities. It helps you grow and outperform your competition. And the last one is leaders have to make the hard calls. I would love to know what you guys think of that. Drop some thoughts in the comments. You can go read the blog post this week over at clearpathcoaches.com/blog if you want to see a little more deeply into it. But those are really the key things that I wanted to talk to you guys about today. If you find yourself in a position where you're in a leadership role and you want to grow, let's schedule some time to talk. You can send me a DM if you're watching this on Facebook. If you're on YouTube, just shoot me a note at craig@clearpathcoaches.com. I would love to talk to you on a short call, figure out where you are, where you want to be, and how we can help you move from being maybe an accidental executive to that very intentional executive that you want to be. So shoot me a note there. Would love to talk to you more. That's it for this week. Thanks, everybody. Take care.